In The Sopranos, we follow New Jersey mob boss Tony Soprano as he looks to be a successful father to his family and also a successful boss to his crime family, a crime family which is full of volatile and colourful characters such as Paulie Gultieri, Ritchie Aprile and that animal Blundetto. One of Tony's crew members is Vito Spatafore, a character introduced in Season 2 as Ritchie Aprile's nephew and later a cousin to Adriana and Jackie Aprile Jr., although technically, the actor who plays him also appeared in Season 1 as a different character, Gino. Vito rises up the ranks of the Aprile crew, not least because so many from the crew, like Ritchie and Gigi, die and their positions are replaced. Eventually, the captain of the Aprile crew, Ralph Cifaretto, mysteriously disappears in Season 4 and Vito becomes captain of the crew. Vito is a relatively minor character in The Sopranos. He pops up here and there with a few lines of dialogue, is often in the crowd during functions or mob meetings, with just a handful of prominent scenes, such as when he kills Jackie Jr. on Ralph's orders in Season 3, and when he demands satisfaction for the beating of his brother by Mustang Sally, also in Season 3. It is only really in Season 5 when Vito starts to rise in prominence, as he's now in charge of construction, which involves the exhausting task of sitting down in a chair while the workers go about their business, and greasing the union when the opportunity arises. Vito is the highest earning captain of the Sopranos family. In fact, in Season 6, when Tony is in a coma, Vito even hints at the idea that he should take over as boss of the entire family should Tony not make it, and fishes around for support in spite of Silvio being acting boss. Season 6 is when Vito is really in the forefront, as he gets a fully fledged storyline of his own, with it being revealed that Vito Spatafore is an ass muncher. In the previous season, Meadow's boyfriend Finn arrives early to the construction site for work and stumbles on Vito blowing a security guard, catching, not pitching, and is intimidated into silence by Vito, who he fears repercussions from, even though Vito invites Finn to a baseball game. What Vito would actually do to Finn, whether he was looking to kill him, rape him, sweet-talk him, plead with him, or intimidate him, is something I want to discuss in another video, so be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification button so you don't miss out on future videos. But as Finn gets out a suitcase and doesn't return to the construction site, it appears Vito is in the clear, so long as Finn doesn't blab. And in Season 6, things do look on the up for Vito. He's lost over 160 pounds, is potentially in the running to take over if Tony snuffs it, has good relations with New York boss Phil Leotardo, and is practically printing money. But then, he is spotted by two mob associates in a gay bar while they are making their collections, spotted dancing and getting his jiggy with it, wearing a motorcycle outfit with the leather jacket and the vest. I'm sorry, it's true. Fearing the consequences, Vito goes into hiding, staying at a bed and breakfast in New Hampshire and beginning a life away from the mob, discovering a gay volunteer fireman, Johnny Cakes, who he hooks up with, and working as a handyman. However, unable to fight the temptation of mob life, Vito returns to Jersey and attempts to strike a deal with Tony that would see him buy himself back into the business. By this point, Vito has been fully outed, as Tony has Finn tell the crew what he saw in Season 5, and the pitchforks have come out for Vito's head. Tony is tempted by Vito's offer, knowing how much business he could bring him, but is conflicted on whether he should accept Vito or take him out, given how the likes of Paulie, Carlo, Christopher and Silvio have reacted to Vito's outing. And while Tony is dilly-dallying in indecision and Vito is out of the closet, Phil Leotardo decides to climb into a closet and hides out at the place Vito is staying at, jumping Vito when he returns from a trip and proceeding to torture and kill him. The whole Vito saga, even after it ended, had a sour taste, both for Vito's own family, such as with his son slipping into delinquency, and the mob world, with Tony having lost respect for harbouring someone who plays for the pink team, and in turn, Tony furious with Phil for having taken out his best earner. Now, looking back, Vito turned out to be gay, and that's a big no-no in the mob, so he's hunted down by the Sopranos family, but more so by New York, as Phil sees it as a personal insult given Vito is married to his cousin. In addition to this, though Phil loves Vito like a brother-in-law, he's old school, and though he doesn't like to mention it, he did 20 fucking years in the can, so for someone like Phil to come out of prison and see that this thing of ours has become men in leather straps dancing in gay bars, well, let's just say it's a fucking disgrace, and he should fucking die. Which Vito does, of course. But what I wanted to look at in this video is who exactly was to blame for Vito's death, because perhaps more so than any other hit in the show, I think there is a whole group of individuals that need to take responsibility for Vito's death. And the more you think about the Vito fiasco, the more people you notice are involved. So let's take a look at the suspects in a rundown, beginning with who I think are most responsible. And at number 1, the man who I think is the most responsible for the death of Vito is Vito himself. And I know I'm blaming the victim here, but come on, you're a gangster, you're in the mafia. Being outed as gay in an atypical American social circle in the early 90s would have been controversial anyway, let alone in the bloody mob. Okay, so Vito clearly has sexual inclinations for other men, and with him having a wife and kid, this may be something he recently developed or hid for a long time, or who knows. But the fact is, Vito knows the consequences of what will happen if it's discovered he's gay. And I know that people do crazy things when they're horny, but the fact that you show up to the construction site where your fellow mobsters work and blow a security guard in the parking lot in full view of whoever's watching, not to mention the guard you're blowing is most likely acquainted with the mobsters at the construction site, and this surely has to be counted as among the most imbecilic decisions made in the show. And the way he handles Finn was quite inept as well. Whatever his intentions were with the ball game, with the way he tried to intimidate Finn outside the toilet, did he really think Finn would turn up to the game? Again, I understand that his mind would have been panicking and it's the best thing he could have thought of at the time. But as the consequences of the Sopranos finding out was so severe, maybe he should have killed Finn and find whatever rationale he could to Tony and Meadow. Of course, that would mean getting some alone time with Finn before he left the construction site, so I admit he was stuck. But then, if he's already been discovered, why not come square with Finn? He's a civilian, he's open-minded, and he's a nice guy. Why not take a shot at telling the kid that he's gay, and if any of the other guys find out, he would be in serious trouble. So could this be something that they kept between themselves? And he could try to keep Finn happy with cash and tickets to games and stuff. But the way Vito came at Finn looked like he was going to go back in the toilet and piss himself again, so I think we can assume that Vito went down the intimidation route, which only succeeded in Finn never returning to the site, meaning that Vito can no longer get to him, regardless of what he actually wanted to do to him. And just as a side point, though he doesn't make my list because he's a background character, could the security guard not have just told Vito to keep his head down when he saw Finn staring at him? So, Vito had a little scare. He's had a warning. But he's back at it again, only this time he's at a gay bar in the full outfit, dancing in the same town where there is mob activity. It's like he's asking to be killed. At least do that stuff in another state where there's no chance of getting caught by someone you know. But this guy is so stupid that he's boogieing away while another mobster is making collections, and when caught, his excuse is, "I was here, it's a joke." And yes, I know he panicked, he was in a state of shock and couldn't think straight, literally. But if you're going to drive down to a gay bar, put on the uniform, the whole 9 yards, somewhere along the way surely you'd have a contingency plan, an excuse if you got caught, like, I don't know, you were about to make a big score by infiltrating some underground gay mafia or something. The guy just stood there like a potato. He should have waddled after the two guys and shot them in the parking lot. And you might say, well, Vito wouldn't have any reason to think a mobster would show up at a gay bar. But La Cosa Nostra is known to have pieces of business everywhere, including gay bars, and Vito would have known that. Even after this incident, there was still a chance he could claw back his reputation by acting outraged when the accusation is put to him, and saying something like, the guys accusing him owe him money and don't want to pay him back, which is why they made up a story about him being at a club. All very risky, but being a mobster and dancing at a gay bar is also risky, and if you don't want to get wet, don't get in the shower. By fleeing, Vito left himself no defense and practically admitted he was gay. If he demanded a sit down with Sal, Tony would have backed him, as he was his highest earner, as shown by Tony's attitude to the crew when Vito is outed. And Vito got out, he escaped, and yet he comes back, and subsequently spends some time as a corpse, with the authorities trying to pull out a pool cue stuck up his ass. I'm sorry, but Vito has to take most of the blame for his death. His decisions were just one blunder after another. As Tony says, if he wanted to pursue that lifestyle, he should have done so quietly. And I know this line is supposed to be ironic because Sylvia follows it up with something like, he was, wasn't he? But he really wasn't. The second culprit on my list, if we ignore Vito's doctor for giving him pills that made him suck cock, is Phil Leotardo. I mean, obviously, the guy who actually killed Vito has to take some of the blame for his death. Phil may have seen it as a personal insult given Vito was part of his family by marriage and because he was old school, but Vito was not part of his crime family and therefore technically it was none of his business. There's some evidence in the show, which I won't go into detail here but have looked at in another video of mine called Was Phil Leotardo Gay?, that Phil himself was batting for the other side, and as such, him going after Vito so hard was him overcompensating for his own insecurities. Either way, Tony might have been able to calm things down with his crew and coming to an arrangement with Vito coming back in some capacity, but there was no stopping the Shah. The third person I would lay the blame on is Tony. Granted, he is in a difficult position. It was tough to handle with so many members of his crew wanting Vito's head, and truth be told, Tony should have sanctioned Vito's murder. It's right there in the rulebook at number 4 that you can't be a flambe. But because he's thinking of the money Vito made him, Tony is indecisive. At least make it a known fact that no, Vito is not going to be whacked if that's the decision you're going for. Why try and tell everyone a little bit of what they want to hear, especially with Phil? Tony leads him on, telling him they're looking for Vito, but at that point he had no intention of killing him, so why delay things with Phil? How did Tony think the situation would end? Again, Phil was almost impossible to deal with, but Tony wasn't exactly assertive and didn't instill confidence in Phil, which is why he took matters into his own hands. Sticking with Phil, and I think his wife plays a big part in Phil's motivation to take out Vito. In The Sopranos, the women, like Olivia and Janice, have an understated but huge influence over their men, and we see Mrs. Leotardo nag Phil a lot, as if to say he needs to get on with it and kill the man for the honour of the family. And Phil looks exhausted at times, like he just wants to kill Vito to end the nagging. Mrs. Leotardo has lines of dialogue such as, Vito must be made to face his problems squarely, and there's nothing gay about hell. She must have kept the blood flowing in the household, so to speak, kept Phil's finger on the pulse in terms of him having to hunt Vito down, much like how the guys in Tony's crew, Paulie and Carlo in particular, are making sure that Tony doesn't forget that he has a decision to make, and Chris and Myrma, who were of course the ones who told Tony initially. Another set of characters I would say share the blame, in addition to the obvious like the guys at the Bing, are Carmela and Meadow. In fact, more so I would say, because Tony would have never received confirmation that Vito was gay if not for them. Carmela and Rosalie discuss the rumour, and after being prompted by Carmela, Meadow tells them that Finn saw Vito give a guy a blowjob. Now, whether Meadow had the foresight to know whether her simple sentence would have been enough to prompt a man to lose his life, I highly doubt. She had a lot of cognitive dissonance about her father and the people he hung around with, and she dismisses Vito being dangerous or even gay when a terrified Finn spills the beans to her. I don't think she was mature enough to see how far her comments would lead, but it does make me wonder. After all, wouldn't Tony need her to contact Finn when they wanted to hear his story? Would she then have realised at that point, shit just got real? Or perhaps this was Meadow's unconscious revenge against the killer of her boyfriend Jackie Jr. And let's not forget Carmela, of course. Meadow didn't even want to tell her father, but Carmela couldn't keep her mouth shut, telling Tony, "You gotta hear what Meadow just told us," which angers Meadow. And Carmela cannot claim the same naivety her daughter might have. She knows who her husband is, and she must surely know the mob would take Vito out. Maybe she just didn't care. After all, it was something to gossip about. And she didn't care for Vito after her encounter with him and Paulie at the hospital showed they didn't care about her. And plus, she may have figured Vito was a dead man anyway, because it was near enough confirmed at that point. And it's possible, in fact probable, that she agreed that Vito should be taken out. After all, as Carlo tells us, it is a sin. So there you have it. Who do you blame for Vito's murder? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.